Welcome, everyone, to a very special episode of hashtag Real Talk with me, your host, Aaron Bragg. This is the annual fundraiser, holiday fundraiser episode. I think this is the fifth year doing this. I'm getting a little bit older, so I lose a little bit of track of how many times I've done this. This special episode, we're going to do things a little bit different. So normally in holiday episodes, we have special vendors and speakers and everything else. This year has been so different in so many different ways with us being busy with AI and bringing on a new people and just, you know what? So we're going to throw the old ways out the window. We're going to do something different. So no regular sponsors, no vendors, no speakers, just me sitting down with two coworkers talking about AI and building out an AI development program and why it's so important in the year 2026. So I'm going to do standard disclaimer real quick because we are going to be talking about some things work related that have been declassified, so to speak. But I have to do legal and media team make me do this. The opinions and thoughts expressed in this particular episode, as with most episodes, are not necessarily the views of my awesome employer at the time this was recorded, which is Corewell Health. So please take everything with a grain of salt, including my guests. So they may have their own opinions, and it doesn't necessarily reflect on our awesome employer. Okay, disclaimer out of the way. I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to go left to right on my screen. For those of you listening on the podcast, there is no left and right of your screen. You just have a left ear and a right ear. Mr. Aaron Tellis, please tell the listeners a little bit about you and why you want to do this crazy thing called AI development.
Yeah, sure thing. And also, first of all, just thank you for having me on this podcast. It's very cool to be a part of. This is my first podcast appearance, so definitely appreciate it that you could be the guy who opens that door for me. Which I mean, in the past, you have also been the guy who is within this AI space has opened the door for me as well. So very appreciative of you, Aaron. Just wanted to get that out of the way. But yeah, so I the best way I can describe my background is a mixture of data engineering, data governance, and data science. I was undergrad, really focused in financial and like management information systems, more on the ERP side. And as I kind of progressed into graduated from Grand Valley and ended up landing here at Priority Health, I've been in Priority Health for the last 7 years. I've been focusing on data engineering first in Oracle, and now we get to move to the cloud with all this new tool set. And also during some of my time after first coming to Priority Health, I ended up doing my master's in data science. And so it's just been my background with databases and data science, and then AI in 2021 when ChatGPT really kicked off, where I kind of saw the building blocks of the neural networks and the enterprise processes. And I just saw opportunity for AI automation and really not just AI, because ultimately I think it's just comes down to wanting to deliver the best tool and product within my team that can help impact the business. And so that's really what we're going down to. But it's just that all these cool AI tools seem to be some of the best routes to do that. So that's why.
Excellent. Last but not least, Kyle, introduce yourself to listeners.
Yeah, I'm Kyle Jero. I've been a data scientist for the last 8 years. Prior to that, I got a PhD in particle astrophysics from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Go Badgers! And yeah, my time kind of working prior to coming to Corewell Health about a year and a half ago now was kind of that data scientist that you stuck in the back in the lab or, trying to figure out the questions that never really saw the like final end product. Just using my ability to like sift big data sets, answer hard questions that don't really have obvious answers to come to. And that led me to kind of see a lot of problems that if I had had generative AI, 6 years ago, man, we would have done some cool stuff. But like I got to see the challenges of like why are particular problems really hard from the traditional machine learning and data science and algorithm development side. And when generative AI came out, I saw it and immediately just went, wow, there's so much awesome potential here. I really want to be an expert in this particular type of AI and data science for this next wave, and made the full switch over. So I now at Corewell Health am our lead generative AI data scientist. I just focus on and build algorithms and systems and processes and things like that that are built to help our enterprise to get better at using generative AI. Um, trying to think for the last year and a half, the journey we've been on, I sit within the AI group, is basically getting our hands around AI, understanding what tool sets we have that we will be able to use safely, and then also starting to think about how we're going to scale that in the enterprise. And I'm sure that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
Excellent. So I've been working these with these guys for a while, and I learned two new tidbits of information. One, Aaron T, I didn't realize you had a master's. So wow to that. And Kyle, you had said it before, but I don't know why it didn't click, except the fact that I'm getting older and more senile, apparently. PhD. So I could always call you, we could always call you Dr. Jero, right? So when you're doing some mad data scientist stuff, I'm gonna break out the Doc Jero. So
Yeah, yeah.
all
Well,
right.
you'll note that I didn't introduce myself as Dr. Jero. So I'll keep
Which is
talking
good.
to you if you do that, but I will hold it a little bit against you. I do generally do not go out by Dr. Giro,
Well,
especially now that
considering
we
we're
know
in
many real
healthcare,
doctors.
right? Like it is very important. So at work and obviously in work related environments, we definitely don't want to say doc because being in healthcare, people would mistake you. And as like
Mm,
we were hanging out with when you were in town the other day, we were
yeah, yeah,
actually hanging out with a real clinical doctor that uses AI. So okay. All
yeah,
right. Let's jump into this topic. Um, so the first thing I want to talk about is we're gonna start our journey. So we're gonna go back in time. Some of this you did help with, some of this you didn't. So if you want to answer squishily, that's okay. But the idea is I want to bring in the listeners and viewers from the beginning where we started this journey 2 years ago to where we are now. So I do think you can talk a little bit about the background on the creation of the AI COE, even though you weren't there right at the beginning and in developing some of those initial AI policies and helping. Um, Talk to me a little bit about why a healthcare system and maybe actually any businesses at this point of like medium or larger size should have an artificial intelligence center of excellence.
yeah. Um, and yeah, as you disclaimed, I was not there when this was created, so I'll be giving a little bit of a what happened, and maybe you can correct me because I think you might have been involved in that too. But when the ChatGPT moment happened for everybody. I think a lot of enterprises in particular that were not, tech forward at the time kind of looked at that and went like, that looks really dangerous. And the immediate response was, we're going to turn that off right now. We don't want that to be something that we have running around. And I think early on too, there were a lot of reports of, different different companies that got access to it early and had given information and now it was like part of the training data and stuff. So it was a very scary time early. To us, the AICOE has been an instrumental part of kind of moving from that stance forward to how do we become more kind of safe through compliance, safe through policy, rather than just like defaulting always to we're going to turn this off and we're just not going to let people use this at work. So we've gone through a couple different stages that the AICOE has been really instrumental in like how are we going to offer the first trainings to allow somebody to know the risks and accept the risks of such a tool. We use Copilot from Microsoft as our main AI source that people can use to now it's actually a part of our compliance and onboarding training. So everybody at Corewell has to learn about AI and have it be a tool that they accept the risk of if they choose to use it. Um, that that's been the biggest part of the journey. The other piece is just centralization, right? Everybody wants to know what this thing is. People keep writing it into their different kind of plans for the next year, next 6 months, whatever. And then they have to go, well, now what?
Including our
You know?
CIO.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so the AI COE kind of also acts as a centralization place for people that are interested or concerned about AI to come to have a conversation, to get a little bit of extra help, legwork, in on how do we make our steps forward in our progress? What can we do? What can't we do? How do we onboard a tool? All the kind of like the how does it get done kind of questions end up there. Um, yeah.
Excellent. So that brings me to the next part of our initial journey. Um, Aaron, tell us, I had brought you in. You were one of the first non-traditional developers that we brought into the development COE, or actually, at the time it was the Software Development Center of Excellence. One of the epiphanies that I had with several other peers was we were quickly seeing, the vibe coding, what have you, also, coming along like Kyle said, but more importantly, we were starting to, as some of the AI exploration, we were starting to see how other teams were using it. And you were one of the first that we reached out to where, hey, you need to join the Software Development Center of Excellence and really give your input because you're not a traditional software developer, right? So that was super important. And then a couple months in the journey, we decided to, hey, we need to drop software from the title altogether because we are including more and more teams. And it truly is becoming like a development center of excellence, whether it's web development, mobile development, application development, right? Like we're seeing that development is so much more than just, web and mobile applications. So Aaron, what was your initial thoughts when you were joining that? Because you came on at a time where we decided to put in an enterprise repo, right? And this is not super secret information, so we can talk about it. The GitHub Enterprise, and you're one of the folks that had to champion why we wanted to take the repos all from all these different places that we had, Bitbucket, SVN, and everywhere else, and go to the enterprise platform because you actually kind of had to sell the idea. What was your thought in those initial stages, and what was some of the initial resistance that you ran into?
Yeah, the I mean, just initially joining the group, I think that, this being so new, there were obviously feelings of just like there's so much complexity going on. We're doing all of these migrations at once within my team and across the organization. And so it's just I was happy to be called out as someone to be a part of this group because I do play a forefront role in kind of helping my personal team and as well as just sharing my learnings throughout that help with the greater organization. And so yeah, to be involved with the group made sense, but obviously, first stepping in and actually understanding like what do we have the capabilities to do versus where we are today and how is this going to look going into the future. There was a part where reality has to set in, and I don't know if your viewers know what the development COE is, but essentially it's a lot of individuals picking up additional work on top of their other work in order to help guide the development practices across the organization. And so, yeah, I mean, it's excitement and then reality sets in. But then I think working with you, Kyle, and other members of the group, just having this forum for these discussions where we can bring these problems from our team back to the group and start to actually work through like, hey, we're all going through this migration, and some of our team members are seeing these problems. What can we do to then apply some higher level structure so that more developers can benefit from our learnings within our individual teams. And I think that that's honestly a muscle that we need to continue to build, but it is, it's a work in progress. And yeah, as far as what was the second part of your question?
what the selling point, right? Because you're having teams that have kind of done their own thing in the integrated data analytics space,
Yeah,
kind of be able to do their own thing, right? And now all of
yeah,
a sudden we're kind of forcing them into this enterprise solution. So
yeah.
what's the initial pushback and how did you win some of them over?
Yeah, yeah. I think the pushback is always obvious. It's like change management, right? Like you push people through new processes and new tools, and some people have been with the organization for a long time, and so it is definitely like working with that people aspect of trying to communicate the value that they'll receive. Even so, we were previously on Bitbucket as well, and migrating towards GitHub, and so with that migration, it was really just around communicating, hey, we'll have access to things like actions, and we'll be able to automate a lot of our processes that today we have to have like manual release coordinators talking with cross-functional teams to move code around and do testing. And so really just highlighting that, hey guys, we're in this new world, and currently it's painful because we don't really know the structure that we should be applying, like you said, non-traditional development team. And so really just having them understand this is their life today, and this is the life that they can have if we all cooperate. And then also just providing the support in order to help facilitate that transition, I think is really the selling point. You get a lot of, just great stories. After a while, you can see people's mindsets shifting around how they're approaching work. And so it is just a time-based process, and staying patient and helpful.
Excellent. Which leads me to the next question. So Kyle, obviously we go live with the GitHub Enterprise and the integration with Microsoft Visual Studio Code and all these wonderful tools that we obviously in information security turned off at the beginning until we could get a bigger idea of what we're doing and more visibility. But as we slowly started turning things on, what kind of happened in your world? And you actually came up with a cool idea. So tell me a little bit about your challenges and why you came up with that idea.
Yeah, I don't know if I came up with the idea so much as I just asked the right questions over and over again without realizing it. I think, it was an interesting kind of time. And it's also, I think, important to call back to like, we turned that on early in 2025. What GitHub was offering us from the AI side, very different from what we have now. So it wasn't that we like left things off intentionally. I think it was more we didn't have a plan for how we were going to keep up with the pace of what GitHub was gonna about to do that last year. Um, we got that AI features turned on, the AI coding assistants and stuff, and it was really helpful, and it was a good big leap for developers that are interested in that type of technology initially. But we were getting new models, right? I think everybody did a release of, GPTs and Claudes and such over the summer. And then GitHub was rolling out different agent type functionalities, extending the ways in which you could integrate it to do code reviews and things like that. And so people that are using this technology for their personal projects started to beginning to try to ask the question at work, where I see this in my personal VS Code, why don't I see it in my regular VS Code here at work too? And where does that question go? Is the ultimate like, kind of a thing. Is this an AI question? Is this a software development question? And they actually found the AI COE first. And so one of the things the team members of the AI COE do is kind of like when a question comes to us, we kind of just latch on to it. And even if we can't be the ones to answer it, we like make sure that thing finds a home eventually. And so I brought that back to the dev COE and said, hey, I don't think it's right for me to be the source of all control of information about how devs practice AI. And I mean, I can provide some information. I do use this technology and stuff, but I think we need to find the right middle ground here. And after a couple kind of meetings and talking about philosophy and stuff on how we wanted to kind of have our devs be trained and have that initial testing done, That's when the Dev COE decided that there should be an AI subcommittee named T as the leader, and then asked me to kind of join in to give the AI COE perspective and help kind of with how are we going to do the testing and all the things around this. So that's how we got there. We, have been working through that process. What the subcommittee has been meeting now for the last 4 months approximately. We've gone from nothing to actually having active projects work. So it's a very exciting time. Yeah.
So already you, Mr. Tellis. So leading that, right, had to have been both I know you were excited at the beginning and also you were a little nervous, especially, I had to go ask different leaders, right? Because as you both you and Kyle pointed out, like these center of excellences, like these are responsibilities on top of your normal workday, but it was getting to the point where this stuff was coming in enough and affecting the business enough to where then I went to the various leaders and said, "Hey, I need you to commit, let me have your guys' time for at least 1 hour a week, maybe two. I promise it won't be more than that." And to all the dish both non-digital and the digital services leadership, I didn't get any pushback. I mean, kudos to the different leaders to seeing like this, because early on it was new, right? And it could have been a
Right.
fad. But kudos to some of the leaders to be able to see like this isn't something that's going to go away. So I guess explain your initial direction for the new subcommittee and how you kind of went about selecting the group, right? Because Pal and I pretty much stepped back and said, okay, hey, this is your baby, so to speak, and creating the vision. So walk me through the early days of the AI development, or the Dev AI COE.
Yeah. So as far as my thinking going into the role, it was mainly focused on how do I juggle the goals and the constraints, and then how do we develop a plan given the goals and the constraints. Um, the AICOE and the organization has provided a decent direction in understanding what our general guidelines, guardrails that we want to have set in place. And so, and then also Kyle helped reinforce a lot of that through, conversation. Um, but then I guess taking those constraints and really aligning it with who in the organization would really want to be a part of this group, because I guess that's one piece, right? Like there are a lot of different feelings about AI as like a spectrum, right? From if you can think of what is the innovation diffusion, the chart where you have your innovators and your early adopters, and you have your laggards on the far right hand side. So wanting to first get a representative selection of candidates who would be aligned with just who would want to be associated with the group, but then also trying to focus on when thinking about development and developing with AI, it's really unique to different perspectives, right? So you kind of like named them off earlier: web development or data pipeline development. Like these different areas, depending on what you're actually developing, can have a different experience when you're using these tools. And so wanting to have a group that's representative of the different kinds of developments that happen across the organization was also important. And then third, I think it was just wanting to have a group of individuals that are diverse enough to where not every proposed decision just has no pushback, but then also not wanting to have a group of, everyone just says no to everything, and when we can't move anything forward, and so just trying to find a balance between that while obviously everybody is constrained with their resources. So yeah, um, kind of put on my was his name Nick from the Avengers, and got the group
Fury,
together.
yep.
Yeah,
There you go.
Nick Fury, yep. And yeah, just got a group of highly enthused individuals together with yourself and Kyle and a couple members from the development COE. So yeah, that's how we came together.
Excellent. And you did a fabulous job because there are definitely some Avengers in our team. we Eddie, since I won't say his last name since I don't have permission from him yet, but Eddie and others I think are so important because like you said, having people that don't automatically say yes because they were excited and they wanted to try out all these new tools, but they also realize both the security and business impact of turning these on, which is a good segue to the question I have for Kyle. Is even before the creation of the Dev AI subcommittee, you were starting to see those early adopters ask for new types of tools, right? Especially newer large language models that were coming online with GitHub. We only had a few of them turned on the beginning because we had to do a lot of vetting. What was some of the initial challenges that you had in that vetting process that you kind of learned through to the point now where things go a lot smoother and we onboard new LLMs for the devs a lot quicker than we used to?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting one where it's a challenge in all three of the people, process, and technology kind of perspectives that you have to do to move stuff through business. Um, for the people side, who do you ask? Who who do you even begin to talk to say, hey, we are interested in turning on Claude. It's not a historic model or provider that we've worked with. How do we even begin that, right? So understanding, and that's part of the perspective that I had from the AI SUE that helped a bit is okay, it's this person in compliance. We can start there, you know, begin that conversation, and then process the AICOE or the Dev COE didn't even have a process. When should we be alerting the Dev COE that we're gonna turn on a new, section of GitHub, and how are we going to talk to them about how we're gonna keep it safe and just isolated to that group of developers, and then the technology side, right? There's so many features to turn on. How are we going to prioritize them when we turn them on for that small group? What do they need to do? What is their responsibility to the rest of the organization? Is it just to test it? Do they have to write the documentation? Those were all the different steps that we had to walk through. Each one has its own unique challenge. I think the thing that we picked up to and where we stand today is we have that kind of Avengers team that we bring in. They have different areas of specialty and different areas of expertise in AI. We have a roadmap that's kind of built along the lines of these people will probably really want to do this. We've heard them say that, so it's not like a guess or anything like that. We will alert the dev COE proper when something reaches this. Like if we're going to modify a setting within our GitHub Enterprise thing, like we're going to let them know. And we have a proper way that we report that out. We do a lot of work around writing SBARs when we do want to do something, even if it's not going to make it out. We have a formal way of communicating that to each other. And if somebody asks for the documentation, we can make sure that we've got something sitting around. And then before we begin anything, we also write down what in that SBAR we will do once the feature is on. So what's to be tested? What's the time frame? What does success look like? How will we determine if we want to turn it off? And then the most important part, one of the things the subcommittee exists most for is to document, to tell other people what's good, what's bad, and give like that initial, hey, if you're going to be a follow-on user of this, here's what we've learned and what must be off and what must be on. And here's some documents, markdown files that'll help you with getting configured and set up and stuff like that. So,
Which brings me to a question I'll have to answer carefully because since we work so closely with the big M, one of the challenges that we had, right, is the more experienced devs using these tools sometimes get frustrated with the accuracy. And one of the things that you thought about early on, and then, Aaron T and I other embraced is the concept of, a digital development twin, right? And this is, well before some of the, the new agent features, right? So for the listeners, for the sake of this conversation, we're gonna distinguish agents in the sense of development agents, right? Not necessarily like future agentic AI stuff. So that's just a good note. Talk to me a little bit about the concept of a digital development twin, because more and more, especially seeing peers and the industry as a whole, move into the pair programming, which we're going to talk about later. You had this idea of a digital development twin for a while. So you want to talk to me a little bit about that and then maybe some of the challenges, both from a security and a practical point of view.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would the development twin is probably like a sub example of what I think of as just like soon everybody's just going to have a AI kind of twin that they'll be able to deploy and have do work for them within the context of the enterprise. That will be a really awesome day. We have a long road ahead of us to get to that. Um, that what it takes for an individual to do work in an enterprise setting involves a lot of going through different systems, like being the glue that connects our view of one data set to the policies in another, space. Um, that comes with an identity and like a who are you when you log into these things, that is pretty isolated to us as people. For the digital development twin, that's like a more isolated case. So when you're in your development kind of cycle, you're going to GitHub, you're going to VS Code, you're going to maybe Jira, maybe a couple other places to go get that data, go like understand what the context of what you're doing is. And so as I started talking about that and we started doing some projects around different agent work, I said, we're going to have a real challenge here as we start to actually try to like implement this more broadly and having these agents that are like back-end talking agents try to do the same work as like a human would do on the front end type of a thing. Um, and so one of the things that we did as we kind of move towards this AI subcommittee is to say, well, the devs are going to have to be the ones that are doing all the piping for these like future state things anyways. What can we give them as like reasonable ways to test that and start to get used to the ideas of MCP, agentic access, right? All these other kind of elements you need to begin to do this behind the scenes tying. And that's where the idea of like it's probably really valuable on two fronts. One, the actual acceleration of the developer as a developer, right? To be able to get at and use the agent type tooling that's available and really good, right? And already off the shelf from GitHub. But then also start to prepare them for down the line when they have to start to actually implement agents within their processes, agents for users of their environments, understanding and having a bit more comfort with what is this? What is the tool set that we're using here? How does it hook up into our enterprise, identity and access management tooling? Um, Developing the muscle memory there was a really valuable like second component there. So we are actively trying to push towards as feature rich of development uh, AI that we can, especially in the agent space right now.
Which one of the challenges that people will have to run into, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this in a second, Aaron T, is that we quickly had in both the committee and the subcommittee those initial pushback, right? So we're fortunate enough to have that collaborative environment where we want this to like Aaron, like you talked about, dissenting opinions, right? We just don't want full of yes people. We don't want it full of no people, right? You have to have that balance. One of the things that we quickly learned from those initial rounds of using agents in development was, again, we had talked about the mistakes or the frustration, especially with some of the older, more seasoned devs. Well, it's great with this, but not with that, right? So then we had to come up with that concept of, okay, hey, maybe for menial task or basic tasks, right? Break that work off to agents, and then your lead devs can truly work on, tougher solutions. And that seemed to be a little bit of that balance, because one of the other things that was brought up, and Aaron, I'm gonna kick it over to you, is what's going to happen with junior developers, right? Like Zach, which some listeners know Zach from his CloudCon presentation of, how are we going to train junior developers that are relying on these tools and going to code less, right? Because that brings up a valid point. Whether I think it was Salesforce or whoever saying, I'm going to get rid of all junior devs and we're going to do all this with just AI. Well, that's still not a real thing because eventually your senior devs and your lead devs are going to retire, and who's going to fill in that gap. So I guess, Aaron, how did you help balance some of those things, some of those questions, right? Because Zach did have some things like, how are we going to train junior developers that come up on these tools? How am I going to learn to take agents to do this off my plate so I can solely focus on that?
Yeah, I think the it's like a two-pronged for me, two-pronged approach. The just agent conversation in general, I think you want to focus on having the appropriate context for the agent so that whatever work it's doing, it can do it accurately. I think that that's where a lot of the discrepancy comes from, given your different types of development. And so just understanding that for these junior developers and everyone else really, when you're developing with AI, having that correct context can push you forward into developing more effectively. And so, an example is like with the data pipeline development, we struggled. We're able to, point the AI at our repo, and so it can have access to some of our code files. But as we're transitioning, having those connections to what Kyle was like, we're running off the tools Jira and GitHub. We're still in the process of developing those connections, and so while we're in the process, some development is kind of harder than other development. And so education around the context piece and developing the context piece up so that it can be more effective and provide better results for the engineers and developers is really like one approach that we're taking to help support, like I said, the juniors, but then everyone else. And then when it comes to supporting juniors specifically and everyone else, I think that it does come down to also just like the, well, kind of back to the context. There's the first piece that I spoke on, which is like having your AI able to talk to the different contexts that you have available. But then it's also about actually having the context available so that the AI can talk to it. And so we're in a very early stage, right, where we can't just throw all of our policies into the AI and all of our code into the AI and have it have the ability to have the attention on all of that information to spit out an accurate response based on a user's question. And so having that real focus now, which I love coming from the data governance background of can we help support everyone and our juniors by having our policies and our information? And with GitHub Copilot, that's helpful with the instruction markdown files that they make available, the prompt markdown files, as well as just setting up different either markdowns or documents within like Confluence, for example, that can help really just establish what we expect from our engineers so that when our junior engineers are developing, they have access to that information, and also the AI has access to that information. So then actually the AI can then help support the junior developers in their development with things like our planning prompts and our code review prompts. Again, I think it's helpful for everyone. I think with Zach, one of his main concerns is that the juniors will are coming out of college, and so they don't necessarily have all of that enterprise experience over years to actually understand the tools that they're working with. And with AI, it's kind of just very easy to just drink from the spigot without kind of letting the information process. The fire hose gets spraying, and you're just producing a lot of code, and you're feeling productive, but at the end, it doesn't actually make it out into production because then a senior looks at it and realizes that there's a lot of issues here. And so really just providing the support of what our expectations are so that the junior has a guideline that's documented so that they can follow.
Excellent. And I
Can
think
I
we
have
have
one thing there, Aaron?
solutions. Oh, yeah, no, go ahead.
I think the other thing from my side that I always like harken back to when somebody gives me that question is at some point there was no IDE. Like there was no like tab completing like type of a thing. Somebody moved from that to that. And I'm sure at that time also the senior and lead devs of that time were like, well, how is anybody going to learn to remember the syntax of this language, right? And the people that were in school and learning that at that time kind of brought that knowledge with them. And somehow that conversation happened and integrated between the two sides, or the junior devs, followed the rules of the senior and lead devs until the senior and lead devs were gone, and then they got to write the rules or over time wrote the rules and said, this is fine. I think we're on the same journey here. I think that like the people that are in school today that are learning how to integrate this into their day-to-day are going to be the ones that like rise and tell us down the line, hey, this is the best way we've found to do this. These are our best practices. And over time, we will integrate them in. It will not be immediate. We are not going to turn it on for everybody and just say, go wild. That's, part of the process. But I don't also see a world in which we like never answer this question and we never figure out the best way to do it. It will just take a little bit of time. Hopefully a little faster than like, 10 years. I'm hoping in the next couple we'll kind of figure this out and get a good practice going.
I think the bad guys are making it so we have to do that a lot sooner.
Yeah.
What's funny is to an to answer your question, Aaron, on how we're gonna solve some of that, and I'm gonna take some of our 2026 vision stuff and bring it into this because it's relevant. Um, I have been trying to spend a little bit more time on understanding how we can better implement planning agents and more specifically learning the skills stuff, right? So while we have limited use of Claude at this point, I do hope, right, that we can utilize Claude Code and other tools similar to that more down the road because I really think that skills understanding like agent skills is going to help bridge that gap, right? And then you had mentioned the planning agents, right? Like these are things that we're going to have to get more familiar with, especially with the speed that we're going to come up with, right? So while we still do have, and another standard disclaimer for insurance reasons, is we still have humans in the loop, right? At this time, no AI generated code is going to prod without human review. But I could see a day in the future, to your point, Kyle, like we're gonna have to even bend that rule a little bit, right? Because the pace that that good code is going to be created, there'll be future use cases, right? Where depending on what work stream or data flow, we may have AI, peer review AI for certain use cases. It's going to happen. I know some people are freaking out about that because then you get in the Terminator mode. Like, wait a minute, AI is then reviewing AI code. How are we going to know? Like, obviously, with planning agents and skills and stuff like that and guidelines, that are always going to be human in loop at in some sense, but just for the speed of the how fast the business is going to move. To your point, Kyle, we are going to have to adapt and figure out different guardrails for that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just a quick go. I just wanted to
Yeah,
add.
yeah.
So I forgot to mention also the observability tools, like implementing the observability tools on our code. I know that I don't want to give too much information, but we're looking into a vendor in order to help us with being able to review our commits and actually have some higher level analysis to understand areas that could be improved upon based on our policy and structure that we would like to apply to our code. So I think that is also a main point. If you can see what's going on, you can see what areas would need to be approved upon. Yep.
Which
Yeah.
is another thing we'll finish up with. All right, I got to do a time check. Believe it or not, we are blowing blowing through the time. So I'm gonna skip a couple questions, but I'm gonna get to some good things that are super important. So real quick, for both of you, I'm going to change this one to both of you. Last month, Anthropic released details on what, as far as we know, seemed to be the first case of reported case, at least, of AI orchestrated cyber espionage. Right at the time, I do have to chide myself a little bit because at GurCon, one of the tech talk track or one of the tracks in leadership tracks was about AI swarm, upcoming AI swarms and everything else. And I remember talking to a couple of peers. I'm like, that guy focused on that an awful lot, right? Like I'm like, my guess 6 to 9 months. Like, yes, this is something we're gonna have to, defensive AI we're gonna have to deal with. Boy, I was wrong because literally while that track was going on, let's see, that would have been first week of October. While that track was going on, Anthropic was actually dealing with that first attack. I guess over to you, Kyle, first. You've had been part of some recent discussions with security leadership on how do we better integrate, how do we cooperate more, understanding that defensive AI is going to have to be a thing in 2026. I guess what are some of your initial thoughts around that? What are you hopeful for? What are you kind of concerned with?
Yeah, I mean, I I did kind of keep track of that as it was going on. I'm not surprised in the slightest that it's come. I'm honestly a bit surprised it didn't happen sooner, given kind of the conversation that's been going on for over a year now about, line chain and all the things that things can do. Uh, I think from my perspective, where we're at right now is still that we haven't quite gotten all the juice out of the squeeze of like non-agentic, defensive AI. There's a lot to be done just in that space and doing better planned automation that uses AI. I think we're the thing I also always say is like if it's not commonplace yet, right? There's a reason. And we may not know that reason, but I think that there's something going on that's kind of holding that back. Um, and it doesn't make me feel safe. I'm new to this security kind of thought process, but also does give me pause as I think about like, if I were to try and be malicious, what I think I could do with a agentic type system. So
Aaron T, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to go off of Kyle's point, the nightmares that you get from the thought of okay, we enable like different tools on our Copilot agents, and maybe it's like, oops, we gave a tool that could access the internet or even your email, and now it's reading something that slipped through that has a prompt injection, and now it's going through your computer and sending all of your data off to some server off in some land outside of the US. And like so just wanting to avoid that approach, I think to Kyle's point, it is helpful to kind of have that red teaming mindset of all right, if I'm going to be the bad actor, how would I go about doing these things just to give myself the ability to understand like okay, how can we defend, and as we kind of with the development COE's AI subcommittee, as we like look through these features that we want to actually give out to the developers, having to think through and having to collaborate with like the applications teams to understand, okay, if we flick this switch in this area, is that going to cause switches to flick also in other areas that we might not want? And with all this being so new, it is just kind of like needing to be very thorough, which again, I'm so happy I have so many active members of that subcommittee that are fully willing to go dive in deep into the documentation and whatnot.
Yes, I appreciate all of them, and we won't we won't say their names because some of them are open shy or shy open. Like if you know them, they're super talkative.
Yeah.
If you get them in a broader group, they're super quiet. But that's just kind of how it works in the IT and development space. Okay, all right, we're gonna get to closing thoughts here before I do some thank yous about the fundraiser stuff. Um, as we close out 2025 and move into 2026, What are some things that I'm going to ask each of you? What are some things you want to accomplish at both at work, right, and personal? Because there's a lot of us that are doing this as a personal journey also. I have philosophical debates with my wonderful wife all the time, who is my wife refuses to use AI, and then I have me who's embracing it because I have a feeling it's coming whether we want it or not. So I'll start with you, Aaron T. First. What are you most excited for next year, and what do you hope to accomplish both at work? Oh, there's people looking in at you. Or you can wave. Did you book that room? Like we might lose Aaron T for a minute. Is that just a breakout room, or did you actually book a room?
It's a side office space, and
Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay. We don't have
yeah,
to worry
yeah.
about you getting kicked out. For the people on the podcast listening, T is actually at one of the campuses now, and we do have the breakout room, so people can't kick you out of the breakout room. Okay, back to 2026. What do you want to accomplish at work, and what do you want to accomplish personal?
Yeah, I think we want to really focus on continuing the education and adoption pieces. I think we started off with how do we develop with AI and just taking some of the more mundane tasks that we have and applying it during the development as we gain more experience, kind of experimenting with what these tools are good for. Moving on from that, I'm really, especially from data engineering, wanting to take that next step to organizing the context of our warehouse and having the AI agents being able to access that context for both the conceptual business understanding of what that data is and how it's applied to the organization, as well as just the technical ontology of our data. And so, really focusing on making sure that our Copilot agents can grow in their ability to access the right information to then be able to support tasks like planning, developing, code review, testing, all those pieces, really building more of the AI. How do I develop with AI to building it in AI into our actual development process? And through collaboration with many helpful individuals and experimentation from many individuals, I think we'll be successful. So I'm excited.
Excellent. Kyle, kicking over to you. What do you want to accomplish both at work and personal next year?
Yeah, so I think I might have touched on it, but I do a lot of like deterministic automation stuff with AI in my not doing this part of my job. And that in the healthcare space is incredibly exciting. The doctor's note, all the text that gets generated around that is critical for care, but also so many things happen with that note that are not a part of the actual touching of a patient. A lot of reading of that note happens, and there's a ton of space for AI to come in and help simplify and ease the burden on our back office staff that have to today just read through and get summaries and all sorts of stuff to do with that information. So very excited for what that will hold in our development and also the development of our partners in 26. From the personal side, I actually just finally figured out what my like daily driver AI will be. I'm going for Google. I just got signed up for their pro account, so I'm very excited. I've been actually digging in over my break time on some of their more advanced features and what they're rolling out. But I mostly in 26, I'm gonna make a prediction, may be wrong, but we'll see. I think we will see the first like from a big partner, AI agentic browsers come in. And I am very, very interested for personal reasons and also work reasons to see kind of what that leads to. I'm particularly excited to be able to say, go put all these things in my shopping cart at Aldi and wait for me. I'll come check it in a little bit. So, yeah, and kind of just like what AI did for kind of unlocking potential right when it came out. I think that's going to be another big turning point is, you know, an everyday, easy to use, integrated into a system that we're already pretty used to using as a society what having AI that's good enough at doing that will like turn on and enable for everybody in their lives will be pretty exciting.
Excellent. A good way to end things. We ran out of time, and we may have to do a follow up in a month or two because we didn't get into MCP and what we're doing with that kind of technology and AI observability and all these different things like planning agents and skills markdown. Like there's a lot to digest, and like Kyle says, it seemed like we were caught up for a little while, and then nope. With what was it? We shouldn't have spoke that existence. I think it was what it was July or August. You're like, hey, I think we got a good flow. We're getting things under control, and then new functionality came out, and then we got behind the eight ball again. So all right. Before I say goodbye to both of you, I just want to talk. We did fundraising for this episode a little bit different this year. Rather than have one or two vendors sponsor your episode, I was able to use some of the leftover money from CloudCon, which I'm going to try and talk these two gentlemen into having a tech talk track at CloudCon 26. I'm happy to report that we donated over $750 to seven different charities. The charities that we donated to this year were the usual Toys for Tots of West Michigan, North Kent Connect. We added a couple new ones. We donated to Black Girls Code, St. Joseph Indian School, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which obviously Michigan's got some crazy privacy laws that they're trying to punt through. So we had to donate to that. Guiding Light Ministries, and finally Raising Cybers. The total donated for 2025 through the podcast was over $1,500. And I would not be able to do this community work without the support of my awesome leadership team at Corewell Health and Matt, CloudCon co-founder. Shout out to Matt Nelson and the rest of the really bad security crew. Here's hoping that 2026 is another great year. And Kyle and Aaron T, I'm so glad that we finally got to do this. We've been wanting to do it for a while, but our day job has been keeping us pretty busy. So, any parting thoughts from both of you?
Educate your
Uh,
people.
yeah, exactly. Uh, yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn either at Aaron Tellis or the Research Lab, where I do some writing on my residual thoughts from my day to day. So
Excellent. Kyle,
Yeah.
anything you want to plug before we go?
I have no extra plugs. You can find me on LinkedIn. I do my best to answer to people if they ask specific questions.